hear me, right, Bob?
I can hear you.
Perfect. All right. Hang up.
Sorry about that.
All right, Bob, we're back on.
Okay, I can see all of you.
Yes. Oh, you can see everybody now. That's even better.
Yeah, this is much better.
Yes, the technology is awesome. To our
Hello.
advantage. Bob, if you want to kick your screen sharing capabilities back on, we'll pick up right where we left off. Sorry about that.
Okay, I gotta go through this whole process of sharing screen, etc. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, and was I here or here?
There you go. That second one.
This one?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I gotta reset my brain, you know, that's hard to do for.
Actually, I think we're moving on to the questions. That you have on the next slide.
We're not gonna spend any time on these. Let's get directly to this, because I don't want to step on Chloe's time. She's got some interesting stuff to talk about. Okay, so one of the things that we did in the 2000s to about 2016 was get deeply involved in figuring out how we could abandon over time the existing take water from one place, use it in a second place, treat it, and then throw it away in a third place, so that we could make the water recycle, spin around. And in Laredo, the idea would be to take the water that we treat here and put at least 30% of it back in the ground, so that we start to build up groundwater stores under the city and the surrounding area. So anyway, water would be taken from existing sewer lines in the 1 million to 5 million gallons a day, but generally speaking, around 2 to 3 million gallons a day. That water in the wastewater system would be run through a membrane bioreactor. The membrane separates the organics in the water from the water itself, and the water on the other side of the MBR is in fact potable water, but most jurisdictions in the United States would never allow you to go from black water to potable water, which is fine. The waste product we would mix with food waste, treat it for PFAS and pharmaceuticals, run it through an anaerobic digester, make methane, and then use that biogas to generate electricity. About 40% of the electricity generated would be used to operate the plant. The other 60% of the electricity generated would be used for sale. Going back to the water side of this, the water is a portion of the reclaimed water, 30% to 50%, depending on what we're trying to do, would be reintroduced to natural systems, back to groundwater, or to restore surface water systems. The remainder would be sold as reclaimed water. It's useful for everything but bathing and drinking. And the other thing that can be done with it is to take the excess heat from the generation of electricity and heat that water to around 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and then use it to heat and cool surrounding buildings. So if those buildings are up to a mile away, systems can be introduced to heat and cool buildings. These would, generally speaking, at least in the initial stages, building a system like this, being new buildings introduced into the city. So you with me there? These systems actually break even or make money. So this is how this works. A 2 million gallon a day, 2 to 3 million gallon a day plant occupies about 2 acres of land. It treats and resells a portion of the water through the membrane bioreactor. It restores at least 30% of the water to the ground. It captures and uses thermal energy. Captures nutrients, phosphates and nitrates, which can be, particularly nitrates, which can be used for agriculture. And the digestate from the anaerobic digester is a great soil amendment, particularly for restoring urban soils. basic economy of this is that a 2 million gallon a day quirk, we call them community water and energy resource centers. And, you know, don't give me a hard time on this. It took us 2.5 weeks to come up with this term. Anyway, a quirk, have we lost? No, they're on there. Capital costs about $45 million to build. It costs about $3.9 million a year to operate. And the annual utility revenues, depending on what is charged in a particular venue, are between $4 and $7 million a year. And that's before the facility charges a dime for wastewater. So in other words, we're flipping the nature of a wastewater treatment plant. As I'm sure many of you know, wastewater treatment plants are enormous drags on city budgets because they lose money. Just as a quick aside, the $4 billion wastewater treatment plant we use here in Boston was built in 1990. The debt service on the initial $4 billion doesn't run out until 2038. And we started borrowing to rebuild the facility in 2017. That's an additional $2.5 billion on the top of the $4 billion. And the total debt load doesn't finish until the middle 2060s. The useful lifespan of the facility is in the middle 2040s. That means we're picking up a lot of debt for 20 years when we have a facility that's no longer useful to us. Here's a quick valuation done by Industrial Economics of a single work facility in Boston. This kind of thing would need to be done for Laredo. Anyway, the energy and recovery savings are 3.7 to almost $4 million. There's reduced carbon emissions, reduced criteria, pollutants, SOx and NOx, carbon sequestration from introducing green infrastructure. There are tremendous air quality benefits because this system, even though it burns methane, reduces CO2 and methane to close to zero from the plant because of the nature of the burning. There's about 80% effectiveness. Skip the underpinning costs here because you guys aren't built on highways like we are in Boston. But the potential for stream daylighting. So the total net benefit, including actual cash coming in to the city of Laredo, plus the valuation of environmental benefits, is in the $6 to $11 million a year place per introduction of facility. I don't know. I can't remember. You guys treat what, 30 million gallons of wastewater a day? As I recall, something like that, 26 million. So figure with 2 million gallon a day quirks, you're looking at 13 or 14 that you can separate around the community. They operate regardless of catastrophic events. If you plan them correctly, I think you get the drift here. There's an opportunity to have wastewater begin to pay the city as it also restores groundwater supply so that you're beginning to generate a second potential source of potable drinking water. This water released into the ground is available for drinking water within 18 months. I'm not sure, what time is it over there? I'm not sure I have a lot of time. I was going to show you what happens with groundwater released in the ground and then restored as surface water. This kind of thing happens. This is Northeastern's campus, which has a former buried stream with the capture of wastewater and reintroduction of the stream. You make a parking lot begin to look like this. The thing that you need to keep in mind here is that a restored stream is someplace in the 500 to 700 times more effective at handling flooding than a pipe in the ground. And what you need to count on is the accumulation of all that rain that you lose during periods of drought coming and hitting the city in the space of a week or even a day. This is the sort of thing that can happen based on historic soils where groundwater actually flows, where we introduce trees and the like to reduce the impacts of heat island effect and put moisture back in the air to reduce the effects of long periods of, greater than 100 degrees. Anyway, there are lots of environmental benefits to this. Greenhouse gas emission reduction, distributed renewable energy, distributed reclaimed water, evaporative city cooling, the potential for restoring Secaucus Creek, and then there are a lot of community benefits. The nice thing about having a series of about 2 megawatt a day wastewater treatment plants that are providing that power, or at least 60% of that power to the city, is that it's distributed power and water such that in a catastrophic event, the likelihood of all of the systems going down is dramatically reduced. There are green job opportunities, there's flood resilience, drought resilience. I think you get the general idea. The biggest obstacle that we have found is inertia. This flies in the face of the way we've done things in the past, and the resistance to making this change is very high. It would be interesting if Laredo were to look at the opportunity of piloting a single facility and seeing what it actually did for the city. And that's what I have to say. There is a way out of the box. Let me just add this. But repairing, rebuilding, and expanding essentially the same infrastructure that put us in this box and expecting a different outcome is, I think, some call it the definition of insanity. Anyway, I'm happy to take questions, but I also don't want to step on Chloe. Maybe what we should do is just take questions after Chloe.
Sure. We have until 11:05.
Okay, so sorry, it was just a little clear. Should I just go ahead and present?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see that? Okay, great. So hi everyone, my name is Chloe Soltis, and I'm excited to be here for today presenting on a watershed strategy to consider in Laredo. I was actually a student of Bob's in grad school and developed this watershed strategy based on ecological principles like he was teaching, prototypes, some of which we just saw in the previous presentation of restoring nature and trying to keep water local. My primary research focus is on the design of the infrastructural landscapes and how we reject the sacrificial design paradigm that's associated with these landscapes, and instead try to design spaces that promote corporate accountability, community connection, and ecological restoration. So this case study that I'm presenting on today is a solar site in southeastern Georgia. But I hope that it shows a helpful approach that can be followed and created for solar developers and companies looking to build solar sites or other infrastructural landscapes in Laredo, and how the community and nature can benefit just as much as the corporate entities developing these spaces. So across the country, we're seeing a lot of agricultural fields being converted to utility solar landscapes. It's becoming a very common sight, especially in rural parts of the U.S. There were 258,000 acres of solar in 2018, and it's estimated that solar will occupy 3 million acres of land by 2030. So there's a lot of land conversion going on. This conversion is heavily influenced by a lot of the electrification we're seeing, and there's also an ever-increasing number of data centers popping up around the U.S. And we're using the internet and its related technology more than ever before, which creates an ever-increasing demand for cloud storage space and the data centers that house that storage. So this is a very big power sector. Many of these data centers are specifically powering large tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon. And if we zoom into one center over here in Georgia that has a red circle around it, this specific center is a new data center and is owned by Facebook. And if we kind of zoom in and understand what's going on here, we can really better learn the amount of energy required that is required to operate this facility. So it takes 435 megawatts of electricity daily. To put that in perspective, that's enough to power 70,000 homes annually to power this 100,000 square foot data center. However, in order to claim that the energy is powered on by 100% renewable energy, Facebook buys renewable energy credits that are generated by solar sites. So across the state of Georgia, it takes 3,300 acres of land, hundreds of miles away from the data center itself to offset this one building. So this case study focuses on the design of one of these solar sites in the southwest corner of the state where that red box is, and that's Bancroft Station Solar Farm. So this is located in the town of Blakely, Georgia. It's a 1,200 acre site. It was powered on in 2019 and generates over 100 megawatts of power. Facebook buys the generated electricity, but does not own this site. It is operated and owned by a private solar developer company. And when solar developers are approaching sites, they're really looking for three key components as part of whether or not they're going to develop it or not. They're going to be asking, is the land flat? How much sun does the site receive, iridescence, and is it close to an existing transmission line? And so as evident in the before and after of this solar conversion, it's evident that this logic creates straight line boundaries and ecologically fragmented site conditions. More importantly, Facebook is receiving sustainable credit for creating conditions on site that are anything but ecological. And historically, on a site like this, back to the 19th, 20th centuries, it was agricultural, being used for agriculture. In this area, sometimes the railroad, but mostly agriculture. And before that, it was a native lawn leaf, pine, and wiregrass community. By just putting solar on where there was previously agricultural fields, it's just one monoculture taking the place of another. And when these solar sites are actually built, the construction is extremely intensive. The soil is completely disrupted and the erosion risk really skyrockets from all of that disruption. Additionally, Blakely's current zoning requirements has no environmental mitigation for solar site construction. And just in general, purposeful design, besides the design of the array itself, is almost non-existent on these sites. Most county policies, like Blakely's, require landscape architects to design a 6-foot vegetative screening barrier, and that only further disconnects the local human and ecological communities from interacting with the site. And just for context, the rural community surrounding the solar site is struggling economically. Blakely has a population of about 4,600 people, and as of 2012, the average household income is about $37,000, and it has a poverty rate hovering just above 40%, and has pretty much little to no public green space. So this case study is proposing a watershed logic that rejects the fragmented solar developers' logic and screening design standards that are currently on the site and creates the site's current form. And this logic focuses on redefining the boundaries both within and beyond the site to try to keep water local. So this is a map of the current arrays on the site. And if we think about water, and you can see the arrays are really cut out from where the existing streams and wetlands are. There's about 200 acres of these. Each square represents 1 acre, and there's about 200 of them on the existing site. And so they're really trying to squeeze in as much solar as possible around those wetlands. And again, if we look back historically, this is from the 1930s, when the site was in agricultural production. It's been over 100 years where the wetlands have been continually cut back, removed, regrown, and you can imagine how much sedimentation, pollutants, and pesticides and those practices flowed into these wetlands, and there's been nothing to help that situation or try to restore what's been going on for the last 100 years, and now it's just like practice not supporting the restoration either. And so another lens to think about the site in relation to the larger watershed is depicted on this slide. So we can see the solar site, and it's at the center of 3 watersheds: the Lime Branch, the Upper Dry Creek Branch, and the Spring Creek Branch. And when you look at, there's 2 of the 3 watersheds that have available tests on EPA's website, and of those 2 of the limited samplings that are taken, 90 to 100% of all assessed water samples come back as impaired. And the red lines I've depicted here are where the actual tests were taken, and those all have impaired samples with some of the biggest issues they're struggling with being like fecal coliform, nutrients, overload, chemicals. So it's the local water that is in the community is not great. So what this case study is proposing in reaction to this alarming issue is a mandated piece of legislation that we can theoretically call the Solar Watershed Act that would require water quality adhered solar sites to expand their boundaries to touch the surrounding major stream wetlands, which are directly connected to the area's larger watersheds. So here it's connecting to those 3 watersheds that I just mentioned, and the footprint of those sites is greatly expanded. And really the expanded site footprint would be mostly put into conservation. That would be the idea. And the existing streams, wetlands on the site create scaffolding or kind of center the site's ecological restoration efforts. Because when we do this expansion and expand to what an actual natural boundary would be, the site's acres of wetlands would jump up to 500 or 200. And as a designer, you start to think about what strategies can you do to restore these very degraded streams and wetlands. And so these are the 3 existing conditions we would find in those blue squares. You would see that there's removed stream and wetlands, there's degraded planted pine, forest, and wetlands. And due to the solar being on the site, it requires a 200-foot setback. So what that means, that 200-foot setback, you can't have anything tall growing that would cast shade onto the solar panels. So those are kind of the 3 existing wetland stream conditions you would find. And I've come up with a series of different restoration strategies that could be applied to these 3 conditions depending on what you're finding in the existing as the existing condition. And really these solutions can be divided into 2 categories. The first is directly restoring the streams themselves. And so the first strategy of that would be sedimentation removal. So using something like a sand lawn can take off 12 inches of different soils and sediments that have blown into these streams and wetlands over the years. And then you can, restore the habitat that would be there. And another major thing we do directly for stream restoration would be freshwater mussel habitat restoration. In this region, mussels have become classified as federally endangered, and so they're obviously struggling to keep them here. But these mussels are actually really great for removing pollutants, especially those ones I mentioned earlier from the water. So they would actually be cleaning and producing a higher quality of water. So once we move past where the direct water is, whether it's wetland or stream, on either side of the stream, it's what we would call a riparian buffer zone. There's different areas of this riparian buffer that we would want to restore. The area closest to the stream is called the inviolate stream zone. And what we wanted to do here is do dense native plantings that would provide bait stabilization, habitat for animals. As we move further up from the stream, the second zone would be a tropical shrub zone. This would be planted with high-bush blueberry, hazelnut. Those would be pruned annually for branches and wood, and can also be harvested annually for produce. The hazelnut bush can actually be completely coppiced to the nub every 7 to 10 years. And these prunings are important because they produce an additional revenue stream for the site. Because they can be converted into clean biochar through biomass gasification. And then the third layer that is farthest away from the stream is a filter buffer, which would be made up of warm season grasses. And what these warm season grasses are kind of like the first line of defense when there's pollutants or sedimentation flowing down into the stream. These grasses are really good at filtering sedimentation, pollutants, nitrogen, and phosphorus from the water and sucking it in and down. And it can be harvested, the grasses can be harvested during nesting bird seasons to produce erosion waters. So it's another revenue source potentially. And then on the outskirts of the riparian buffer, what you're going to find is those planted pine forests that have been planted for a really long time and their understory are really suffering. And so we'd want to focus on restoring those understories of these plantings, as well as just general other wetland areas, just restoring those understories as well. So I've kind of thrown all these strategies at you, so I'll kind of explain how these play out in real life, sectionally. So we can see here this is a section cut from one solar array to the other, where that white line is in the middle of the picture. And how we apply these strategies from solar panel to solar panel. I know this is probably small on the screen, but this is, I'm going to move through each part of it. So starting on the left where we have the solar arrays, this is a different presentation, but there's a bunch of different biodiversity strategies you can use underneath the panels themselves. Here, this is agrivoltaics, where you would grow some sort of food or crop underneath the panels that would do well in sunshade conditions. So that's the start. And then that first layer of the riparian buffer is just like I referenced here. You can see there's a stream line flowing directly through the middle of this section. So we would want to start working on repairing that riparian buffer with having a first line of defense, the filter warm season grasses. Next would be that tropical shrub zone, and then dense native plantings when we get closer to the river. The river, and then that would be mirrored on the other side until we go back up to where the other solar array is. So it completely covers that space and really turns it into a very rich ecological zone. So another example of how this section would play out on the site is this is just a section cut where that white line is a photo of existing pine forest. That's the bottom left, and then it moves up because it goes into native wetlands. And so here we would want to, restore the native pine understory. Potentially there could be strategies where you actually create trails on the site, so people come in and bike or walk the site. As we move from restoring the degraded pines, we would want to do strategies that would restore the wetlands. And then that stream zone in the middle, we could do the sedimentation, mussels, general habitat restoration. And as the section moves back up, it would go into more wetlands there. So these are just two examples of how this logic works, but every single square on this map would be a little bit different in how we would apply these strategies and logic, but it would apply to all of them. And each square has just a huge variety of different benefits that would be good for the land and ecological community, but also produce revenues to the site and benefit the general community. So there could be ideas such as doing a flood mitigation state credit, generating clean biochar, erosion models, harvestable products like blueberries and hazelnuts from the tropical riparian buffer zone, carbon sequestration credits, returning federally legal mussel species, and improving the water quality and just having a more ecologically connected habitat. And for a town as small as Blakely, if this were to generate even 40 to 50 jobs, that would be a 1% increase in the number of jobs available for the community. So that would be a huge, I think, positive effect. And really thinking of infrastructural sites with logic and frameworks like this really forces a reconciliation between the language of metrics and visualization of what those metrics mean when it's projected onto the landscape. Because if you look at Facebook's ESG ranking, they have a very low environmental risk score. But when you actually look at those environmental metrics they're taking in the landscapes they're creating, it doesn't seem that low of a risk. So it's really this reconciliation between these different conditions we're trying to figure out a solution for. And it really comes down to keeping corporations accountable and asking the question, not only is your energy renewable, but is your energy being regeneratively generated? So I'll kind of leave us there with that thought.
Thank you so much for that, Chloe. Is that the end of your presentation?
That is.
Cool.
I will stop sharing my screen.
Yes, we actually do have some time for questions. If you want to open it up to both Chloe and Bob for any questions on the presentations or your work. But thank you so much for sharing with us, because I think it's really important to consider everything else that's happening all throughout the country when we take into consideration how to implement solutions here locally. So those learnings save us a lot of time, save us a lot of effort and resources that we know we have great limitations on. So thank you. Does anybody? Oh, yes, round of applause. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for Chloe, for Bob? Any comments also that they would like to share? Yes, Susana. And if you would like to introduce yourself also so that Chloe and Bob know who's speaking, that would be great.
Oh, hi, I'm Susana Mansa with BOLIT. It's an environmental social justice organization in Austin. I just had a follow-up question when you talked, and I don't know if it was you or Bob who talked about restoring the creek as a better system and controlling the water runoff. Could you hear me?
Can you hear Chloe or Bob?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Were you able to hear Susana though? Clearly?
We can hear you pretty well. It's very hard to hear the audience.
Okay. Could you repeat it for me? I was just wanting to clarify when they talked about restoring the creeks, was a better system for controlling the water runoff. I just wanted them to elaborate on that issue.
Okay. Yes. Did you hear the question, Bob? I see you nodding your head. Cool.
I'm nodding my head. Chloe, did you hear that?
It was a little muffled for me. I don't know if it was for me or you.
She's asking, I think, let me see if I can paraphrase that. Restoring creeks, exactly what does that mean and how do you do it? Is that basically what you're asking?
Yes, to elaborate more on that solution that you proposed.
Okay, well, bottom line is this. Currently what we're doing is stealing a tremendous amount of water from creeks, both in stormwater and in wastewater, and in Chloe's example, from a solar site. What we've done is industrialized all those areas with impervious surfaces and the like. Whenever it rains, water that would have otherwise infiltrated into the ground and collected in underground aquifers, which would have fed surface water bodies, is simply gathered and thrown away almost immediately. And it's also thrown away, generally speaking, fairly heavily polluted. So in both of our presentations, the whole approach is to change the infrastructure such that we begin to restore the connection between rainwater and historic soils. One of the things I want to emphasize here is that the soils that made surface water creeks, wetlands, and forests work, wherever our cities are, they're all still there. And if we map them, we can take advantage of these technological approaches to restore that rainwater to groundwater connection, and in the process, begin to restore surface water bodies and also create opportunities for reintroducing creeks and wetlands, trees, and even forests. Does that help? Chloe, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you comprehensively covered that. I think.
Thank you, Bob. And yes, Susana said that did cover her question. Does anybody else have a question or a comment that they would like to share? We do have about 8 minutes. And I think it's also
Calm down now. Don't all jump at once.
Alright, I think it's also good to take advantage of this space, maybe start conversations with each other if there are no questions, because something that we do want to emphasize with the Symposium is the importance of collaboration across projects, regions, and communities. I guess if somebody has a question or a comment, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
My name's Enrique. I work with the water plant in Rio Bravo, which is downstream from Laredo. So you made a good point. So yeah, you would build back up aquifers and that would at the end up in our surface water, right? But what about all the cities that are further south that are not receiving any water? We would rob them of all the water that is gonna go downstream the Rio Grande. Because we don't, neither the city of Laredo nor my water plant get water from any aquifers. We're all surface water. So is Zapata, so is San Ignacio, so is the Valley, everybody. So we would be definitely robbing. There's a saying here in Laredo, flush twice, the Valley needs your water.
I think I got it. Actually, I do have it. All you're doing is re-establishing natural loops that existed in Laredo's case 100 to 150 years ago. So you're not actually robbing, you're delaying. What would happen is you first introduce this system where you're putting water back in the ground for some short period of time, probably in the 6-month to 9-month region. The water goes back in the ground and begins to fill up the aquifer. But from that aquifer, the soils and the surface water bodies exist, that water returns to the Rio Grande. So you're not really robbing anybody. What you're doing is actually dramatically enhancing the water quality by running it through the ground, so that the water, as it comes downstream to Rio Bravo and elsewhere, is going to need less treatment before it's used as potable water.
True. But what about like it enters the aquifer, and let's say that this guy right here next to me owns a ranch and he has a well. He doesn't care that the water was supposed to go to the river. It's now in his part of the pump. He's gonna pull it up and give it to his animals and his farming needs. So that water's gone.
Well, it is gone from his well. He uses it for his animals for irrigation. However, when you design the system, what you would do, what I would do if I were designing the system for Laredo, is that I would make sure that his well is not between the aquifer that I'm refilling and on which I can depend for my own drinking water supply in Laredo when the Rio Grande dries up 19 years from now or 18 years from now, whenever it is. And that water then returns. By increasing the groundwater storage, you're actually protecting the surface water flow of the Rio Grande into the future. If this were done throughout the whole area between the dam and the Gulf, you're actually stabilizing flow in the Rio Grande. And you're actually also stabilizing the ranchers as well.
It could make sense, I guess. If everybody would participate, then yeah, it would make sense.
The thing to do here is, I think, is a straightforward investigation on introducing a single quirk in Laredo, how it would work and what the economics of it would look like, and what it would do for groundwater stores and surface water stability really needs to be done. Because clearly, as you all know, Laredo, Texas is not Boston, Massachusetts.
Right.
very different soils and very different, but the principles of the approach still apply.
Yeah, there's another problem about
Okay.
every entity, City of Laredo, Rio Bravo, Zapata, the ranchers, they all own the water. They all have to pay water rights to the TCQ. So when you buy surface water and then you inject it back into the ground, it loses its ownership and now it belongs to the person who owns the land.
Well, so Laredo has a certain amount of acre-feet water rights. Is that correct?
Per BWS, yes.
Okay, so Laredo is withdrawing. I don't know. I mean, I know some of these numbers, but I haven't really looked at them hard lately. But let's say, just for the sake of argument, because the math is easy, it's 30 million gallons a day that's being withdrawn from the reservoir and the river itself. That water comes into the town treats it, and then currently what happens is it gets discharged back into the Rio. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so all we would be doing is interdicting that process and slowing it down. We would withdraw and use the 30 million gallons a day. We would treat the 30 million gallons a day. We would reuse a portion of that 30 million gallons a day, something on the order of 15 to 20 million gallons a day, which actually reduces the demand of Laredo from the Rio Grande in the first place. And then the remainder would be discharged into the local aquifers to fill them up so that we could depend on them in the future. I don't believe that once, you'll have to tell me, I don't know this law, but I don't believe that once the water is removed for Laredo under its permit to withdraw, that anybody else but Laredo owns that water. And so the Laredo, in the process of reusing it and then also discharging to the local aquifers, all Laredo is doing is slowing down and reducing its own demand, and also storing water for future use when you face significant drought. As I recall, wasn't it about a year ago that you were in a pretty serious drought, and the reservoir was down to maybe 19 or 20% of its capacity. So slowing this down and then also building up aquifer storage in town would put the city in a much stronger and more stable position into the future.
I agree. You just have to convince everybody that you're gonna be drinking recycled water again.
But yeah, well, the one thing to remember is once you put it in the ground, within 18 months, that water is
Cleaner than it's
the equivalent of, drinkable, potable water. My other understanding is there is some brine down there. Remember that when you discharge to the aquifer, if there is salt water there, the fresh water is much lighter than brine. And what's happened is that the aquifer has, the fresh water in the aquifer has been drawn down and is no longer there. By reintroducing fresh water above the brine, that water is potable within 18 months.
Thank you so much, Bob, for that answer, and thank you, Chloe, also for joining us today for sharing insight on your project that you've been working on. Even though it's halfway across the country, it's very valuable information for us here to learn.
Thank you so much.
I'll appreciate you here. We're actually at time for our first session here on innovative water solutions and water infrastructure. We are going to go ahead and close down. We'll have an opportunity to ask questions towards the end of this. I know Dell won't be present in person for that, but if anybody has any questions for you, we'll gather them, make a note of them, and send them your way so that we can make that connection also. Because I know we didn't have too much time for questions and comments. But, thank you again, Chloe. We'll go ahead and close it off. And if you guys want to jump off the Zoom or just turn off the cameras, we'll jump back on in 5 minutes. And thank you all for joining us for this session today. We do have 5 minutes of transition in which you're free to either move on to another session or stay here and continue the discussion with us, because I know we were interrupted a little bit by the tech difficulties. So thank you. Yes.
The session on climate resilience and energy, do you know where that is?
It should be right next door.
Okay.
Those were some good questions.
They were really good questions.
Yeah, they got right to the heart of the matter, right? You know.
And questions
One
that
of the-
I wouldn't typically think of. I think you can only think of them when you're familiar with the place locally. When you're, you know, you are
Right.
when you're a local in your area.
Was I able to make enough connections to the Laredo situation to make it real? I think so. I must have, because the questions were good.
I think so, and I think it leaves room for them to ask questions also about local issues.
So where is everybody from that's attending this?
Yes, they can actually hear you. If you guys, the microphone is back there. If you want to just call out some cities, some towns where you're coming from. I'm coming from Houston, South Texas. What about y'all? Cotula? Yes, Cotula. Laredo? 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 A lot of Laredo folks. Laredo. Okay, so we have a lot of local folks from Laredo.
Good.
Yes. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I do want to be mindful of everybody's time because I know we have lunch coming up after this. But I want to thank you all for joining us for our innovative water solutions and water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure breakout session. We do have two incredible guest speakers here, Bob Zimmerman and Chloe Solis, who are going to be sharing with us a little bit about projects that they've been working on, very innovative projects that they've been working on that we can learn a little bit from today and take into account when we're working on solutions for water and wastewater infrastructure in our areas locally. So let me start by doing a brief introduction to Bob. Bob Zimmerman co-founded an academy for winter athletes early in his career, serving as headmaster for 12 years. He then became executive director of the Charles River Watershed Association. Over nearly 30 years, he expanded the focus of the organization to include scientific research and analysis, ecosystem restoration, land and water regulation reform, and restorative technology development. Thank you, Bob, so much for joining us. I see Chloe hopped off. I think she might have fell off. Let me add her back on. Let's see. Before I introduce Chloe, I would like for her to be on. There we go.
Oh, there she is. Good.
So we have Chloe back on. Chloe works as a project manager designing and building outdoor spaces in Southern California. She is also a landscape infrastructure and data management fellow for the RAIN. Her research explores the dissonance between the creation of infrastructural landscapes and the disconnected ecological conditions they produce. Thank you so much, Chloe, for joining us today. And with that being said, I don't want to take up too much of their time, so I will pass it over for them to give us a brief presentation, which we will follow with questions and answers for Bob and Chloe. Bob, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that Councilwoman Melissa there? Are you there? I know her.
Yes.
Let's see if I can share my screen here. Oops, I'm starting at the. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, can you all see that? Okay. I want to be relatively quick because I don't want to step on Chloe. She's got some good stuff to show. But first, let me reintroduce you to South Texas and the United States and what's happening with the largest storms that hit us on an annual basis. That's 1% storms, or in the vernacular, they're known as 100-year storms. The probability of their actually hitting us is 1 in 100 years. And the black dots give you some idea as to the increase in 100-year storms across the United States. The thing I would point out to you here is where you are located in South Texas. You see that little gray dot there? That means that the number of 100-year storms that hit the Laredo region has decreased by 50% in the last 60 years. That should give us all serious pause. And then what I will show you here is a quick map on what's happening with rainfall in the United States. The increase in 1% storms, 100-year storms, is concentrated in the Northeast and the upper Midwest. The increase of 71% in New England, New York, and parts of Pennsylvania. And in the upper Midwest, an increase of 7% in the southeast of the United States, 27% in Texas, 16%. The other thing that's happening here, which this slide showed, is that there is an increase in periods of drought before we get these storms. So what we're getting with the new climate change is longer periods with little or no rain, followed by intense storms where we get all the rain we should have gotten in that period historically, all at once. As an example, California went through 23 years of severe drought. And they got effectively all the precipitation that would have hit the area over that 23 years in 4 to 5 months this last winter into the early spring. Caused severe damage, flooding, and some great skiing for those of you who are interested in skiing. The other thing that we're beginning to see is a lot of inland flooding associated with precipitation. So, yes, we get rivers that get high and crest their banks and cause problems. But more likely is inland flooding associated with precipitation where the water has no way to get out of town. We've done a really good job of burying surface water bodies, former tributaries and wetlands that store that water. So that combination, inland flooding and extended periods of drought, puts us all very much at risk. This presentation is a way to begin to think about those two problems differently. I'm going to do this because I know Boston very well. It's where I live, and I've done a lot of research here. My staff has done a lot of research here. So let me briefly introduce you to the Boston water system, and I will try to make it relational to the situation in Laredo, Texas. This is Boston's water supply, 2 big reservoirs in central Massachusetts. Deliver about 200 million gallons a day, 150 million gallons a day to the city of Boston and 47 other communities. And then this system, wastewater collection, collects all that water once it's used, sends it to Deer Island, which is here on the edge of Boston Harbor, treats it, and then discharges it 9.5 miles out into the middle of Massachusetts Bay. Approximately 50% of the water collected by this system is not wastewater. It's groundwater that leaks into the system. Maybe a little counterintuitive, but when there are fissures in the pipes that collect wastewater, the groundwater in the surrounding land leaks into the pipe because the pressure in the pipe is so much lower than the pressure in the ground. So in Laredo, I don't know what the number is, but some number of the 25 to 30 million gallons that you treat every day is otherwise potable groundwater leaking into the system and being discharged as wastewater. As a matter of fact, engineers count on it because the treatment processes that we use in most wastewater treatment plants like diluted wastewater better than they do concentrated wastewater. Okay, so one of the things that we need to do to sort of begin to think about what I'm about to introduce is that we need to think about wastewater and stormwater differently. Most of us don't think about wastewater and stormwater at all. But Today, we're going to think about them. Wastewater is simply dirty water, water with organics in it that we treat and then discharge. And stormwater is water that gets collected. We make it sound like it's the storm's fault, that runoff from our cities and towns is heavily polluted. It's actually not the storm's fault, it's our fault. Once the water hits pavement and the like, it picks up a lot of bad stuff, which goes immediately to the grate on the side of the street and directly out to our surface water bodies, polluting them. And the impacts of these collection and delivery systems, they're not going to go away. They're with us as long as we depend on these systems. They're inherent to the systems. We're also at a time when most of these water, wastewater, and stormwater systems over the next decade or so across the United States are going to cost us someplace in the $3 trillion category to repair and rebuild. Not to extend or expand them, just to repair and rebuild existing systems. And the problem is climate change. These systems were built when climate change as we know it didn't exist. And they don't do a very good job of handling a lot of water all at once and then no water for long periods of time. And yet, very few, almost no municipalities in the United States think differently about how these systems work and about how they might be changed to work better given the reality of climate. So I want to introduce you to a new kind of wastewater treatment plant. So instead of thinking about a single wastewater treatment plant to treat all of Laredo's wastewater, what we're going to start to do is break that wastewater up into smaller units and collect it from smaller segments of the city. We're going to use the existing sewer line here on the upper left-hand corner. The water will be pumped out of the sewer line and taken into a small wastewater treatment plant, treating effectively 2 or 3 million gallons a day. But for the sake of argument, let's call this one a 2 million gallon a day plant. That water is run then through what's called a membrane bioreactor. So on the one side of the bioreactor, what's collected is all the organics in that wastewater. And on the other side of the membrane bioreactor is effectively potable water. Now we can't drink it. I think there are only 2 jurisdictions in the United States that allow regulatorily for black water to be turned into potable water. But we don't need it to be turned into potable drinking and bathing water. This water is good for everything but bathing and drinking. We take the organics and we introduce them to sludge digesters called, the real name is anaerobic digesters, and we mix the sludge, once treated for PFAS and the like, with food waste. We introduce that to an anaerobic digester, which makes methane, a biogas. We use that biogas to generate electricity. About 40% of the electricity generated, call it 2 megawatts per plant. About 40% of that electricity is used to operate the plant. The other 60% is available for sale in the community. And if Laredo has 30 million gallons a day that it's treating, then you have effectively 15 plants. The idea is to sell those plants, sell that electricity locally, make it available locally. By the way, you're dramatically reducing greenhouse gas emissions this way because sludge creates methane and CO2 left to itself. Same with food waste. Ask me the question and I'll give you the real numbers here, but the efficiency of these kinds of plants is about 80%, meaning that you burn up virtually all of the methane. Go back to the other side on the clean water side. We take the treated effluent It's treated to very high standards, so it can be used as reclaimed water, which we then turn around and sell. But before we sell it, what we do is we take the heat generated by creating electricity, and we spike the heat of the water that we've treated to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and we use that to ship out to buildings in the neighborhood up to as much as a half mile to a mile away from the plant to heat and cool those facilities without greenhouse gases, without using natural gas or fuel oil. We collect that water, we turn around, and we sell it as reclaimed water for irrigation, flushing toilets, everything but bathing and drinking. You can do the laundry with this water. But we reserve at least 30% of the water to put back in the ground. See in the upper right hand, this little circle here, what we're doing with that water is reintroducing it into the natural system so that we begin to fill up aquifers, restore surface water bodies, and introduce dramatically enhanced clean water to those facilities. What I'm telling you is that we're turning wastewater into a profit-making enterprise. Currently, wastewater in any municipality in the United States is a huge drain on municipal budgets. To borrow the money, build the plant, and they're money losers, no matter how much we charge for a gallon of treated wastewater to our customers. We're also restoring natural systems. We're generating money from capturing and selling the thermal energy to heat and cool surrounding buildings. I think you get the idea here. The notion is to turn wastewater into a valuable resource for cities and towns. Basically, it looks like this. A 2 million gallon a day community water and energy resource center, that's what QUARC stands for. The total capital cost for installing one of these on about 2 acres of land is $45 million. The total operations and maintenance cost on an annual basis is about $3.9 million a year. And yet the utility revenues from the sale of electricity, the sale of reclaimed water, and the sale of thermal energy to heat and cool surrounding buildings is someplace between $4 million and $7 million a year, depending on the variable costs of those utilities in South Texas. That money is in addition to whatever we charge for wastewater treatment. You with me here on this? Important, because once you add wastewater treatment to this, you can pay off these systems in 5 to 7 years, and then they start generating new sources of income for municipalities. This is a valuation by Industrial Economics for the city of Boston on what a QUARC, 2 million gallon a day QUARC would generate in actual money and in green infrastructure, not money you can put, holding money you can put in your pocket, but in important reduction in pollutants. So you got energy recovery and energy savings, you have reduced carbon emissions, you have reduced criteria pollutant emissions like sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, and those kinds of bad things. There's carbon sequestration involved in this. Oh, by the way, one of the other things is the digestate from an anaerobic digester is a really good soil amendment. So you could begin to restore Laredo soils. Anyway, this underpinning costs here, I should probably remove this in future presentations. Take that out of this number. A 2 million gallon a day plant, before it charges for wastewater treatment, is going to generate something like $6 million to $14 million annually. That's a single 2 million gallon a day plant. One of the things that can be done with this treated effluent, and I think in Laredo it's actually far more important in Laredo than it is in New England, where we get a lot of water, is restoring the natural abundance of water in the area. I'm not going to spend it. So if we begin to discharge, say, 30% of 30 million gallons a day being treated in these facilities, or 10 million gallons, that water goes back into the ground. There is the opportunity to restore surface water bodies. This is a picture from Northeastern's campus here in Boston. There's an old creek that runs right underneath this parking lot, and it doesn't need to look like this. With the restoration of groundwater discharge, that area can look like this. It's only 500,000 gallons a day that's going in to restore this creek. And as soon as we reintroduce this creek, we reduce heat island impacts, we increase flood protection, because this creek can handle something like 500 to 700 times more water than a pipe in the ground. I think you get the idea. You can also introduce plant life. You're beginning to treat stormwater runoff in this riparian zone so that you're cleaning up that water as well. You can do the same thing by following. When we built Laredo, and we made the creeks there either much smaller or simply made them go away, bulldozed them into submission. The soils that made those creeks operate are still there. All we have to do is look at historical mapping and historic pictures from, say, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and we can figure out where those soils are and begin to restore the connection between rainwater and groundwater and our collected wastewater, now cleaned, and discharge it, such that we begin to remediate the severe consequences of climate, heat island effect, and the like. In other words, this whole approach has a whole suite of environmental benefits. There are, first of all, let me re-emphasize, the economic benefits, relatively speaking, are off the charts for a municipality. If all the work does is break even, that's a huge benefit to the city of Laredo and the expenses that it inherits with the operation of surface wastewater treatment plants. Then there are the greenhouse gas reductions, the reintroduction of creeks and wetlands and surface water bodies for flood storage and conveyance. You have drought resilience. You have distributed renewable energy. There are 15 such plants across the town. Given catastrophic events, it's extremely unlikely that all 15 units would go down. You have evaporative city cooling, restored river and stream flow. You get the drift. And associated with that are the community benefits, which are also pretty much off the charts. Distributed power and water, flood and drought resilience, a lot of green jobs, repurposed pipes, greater neighborhood self-determination, etc. The biggest obstacle, by far, the single biggest obstacle to this approach being adopted in any municipality in the country is inertia. We've never done this before. Why would we do it now? And the reason we do it now is because the way we're doing it has put us in this environmental box, this climate box, this at-risk box for both drought and flooding. And we need to change the way we do things to anticipate the consequences of climate. And in so doing, we're also going to enhance the economics of cities like Laredo. Bottom line is, our research has shown that there is a path out of this climate box. But if you think that it lies along repairing, rebuilding, and expanding essentially the same infrastructure that put us in this box, you're dreaming. That's called insanity. Redoing the same thing we've done and expecting a different outcome. Not going to happen. So that's my short piece. I'm looking forward to conversation after Chloe's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Bob. And yes, we'll hold off on questions and give Chloe a chance to share her presentation so that we can keep questions until the end and address them to both Bob and Chloe. So thank you, Bob, and Chloe, we'll pass it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Perfect. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see your full screen.
Awesome. Okay, one second. Oops. Okay, there we go. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Chloe and I'm very excited to be here today presenting as part of this water strategy session. I was actually a student of Bob's in grad school and developed this watershed strategy based on ecological principles of restoring nature and keeping water local that Bob taught in that class. My primary research focus is on the design of infrastructural landscapes and how we reject the sacrificial design paradigm that's associated with these landscapes and instead design spaces that promote corporate accountability, community connection, and ecological restoration. So this case study I'm presenting today is on a solar site in southwestern Georgia, but I hope it's a helpful approach that could be followed in creating for solar developers and companies looking to build solar sites or even other infrastructural landscapes in Laredo, and how the community and nature can benefit just as much as those corporations from the development of the space. So to get started, across the country, we're seeing in mass agricultural fields being converted into utility solar landscapes, especially in the rural areas of the U.S. And the process looks something like this. In 2018, there was 258,000 acres in solar, of utility solar, and that is expected to go up to 3 million by 2030. So it's a very rapidly growing field of industry. This conversion is heavily influenced by a lot of the electrification happening, but also as part of that electrification, the ever-increasing number of data centers that are popping up around the U.S. We're using the internet and its related technology more than ever before, which creates an ever-increasing demand for cloud storage space and the data centers that house that cloud storage. If we take a look here at this map, many of the data centers are specifically powering large tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon. And if we zoom into one that has the red circle around it, that is the data center, that is the Newton data center in Georgia, and that one is owned by Facebook. So this is the data center at the center of this case study. And first we just need to understand the immense amount of energy that's required to operate this facility. So this slide kind of breaks that down, that it takes 435 megawatts daily of energy to run the facility, and to put that into perspective, that's enough to power 70,000 homes annually, and that's needed daily to power a 100,000 square foot data center. However, in order to claim that this data center is powered by 100% renewable energy, Facebook buys renewable energy credits that are generated by solar sites across the state. So it takes over 3,300 acres of land across the state of Georgia, hundreds of miles away from the data center itself, to offset this one building. So this case study focuses on the design of a solar site called Bancroft Station Solar Farm. It has the red box around it, and it's in the southwestern corner of the state. This is the site. It's located in Blakely, Georgia. It's 1,200 acres. It was powered on in 2019 and generates 100 megawatts of power. Facebook buys generated electricity but does not own the site. It is operated and owned by a private company or solar developer. And currently, when solar developers go into these landscapes and communities, they're looking for three components when choosing whether or not to develop a site. First, they're looking at, is the land flat, how much sun does it receive, and is it close to an existing transmission line? But if we take a look in the sites before and after, we see that the straightforward logic creates straight line boundaries and ecologically fragmented site conditions. More importantly, Facebook receives sustainable credit for creating conditions on site that are anything but ecological. And on the site itself, if we just look at the site history in this area of the country, a lot of the space was long leaf pine wiregrass communities that was then converted to agriculture in the 19th century, and now it's solar, so it's just being converted from one monoculture, or there's just one monoculture taking the place of the other, without harkening back to what the space originally was, which was a long leaf pine wiregrass community. Construction on these sites, as you can imagine, is very intensive. Soil is completely disrupted, and the erosion risk really skyrockets from that construction. Additionally, Blakely's current zoning requirements require no environmental mitigation for the site's construction. And besides the design of the solar arrays themselves, there's really no other purposeful landscape design. Most county policies, like Blakely's, require landscape architects to design a 6-foot screening barrier. But this only further disconnects the local human and ecological communities from interacting with this site. And for context, Blakely is a rural community surrounding Bancroft Station area. You kind of see where the town center is. But it's struggling economically. Blakely has a population of about 4,600 people, and as of 2021, the average household income is about $37,000, and the poverty rate hovers just above 40%. And they have essentially no public green space in its town center. So what this project is doing, now that you kind of understand the context and circumstances, is it's proposing a watershed logic that rejects the fragmented solar developers' logic and screening design standards that create the solar site's current form. This logic focuses on redefining boundaries both within and beyond the site, and focuses on keeping water local to the solar site. So this is a kind of a breakdown of the existing site in order their arrays, or where they were planning future arrays, solar arrays. And if we think about water and where is there water on the site, and we map where the wetlands and streams are, it would look something like this. Each of those blue boxes is 1 square acre of wetlands. And you can kind of see the solar arrays have really just been carved out around where those wetlands are. And again, this isn't a new issue. If we go back to the 1930s and look at an aerial image, in the red line is where the solar site is, the current boundaries of the solar site. It's just been over 100 years where the wetlands have been removed, cut back, regrown for a very long period of time, and there's been no restoration efforts, so we can only imagine all of the sedimentation, pollutants, pesticides from those agricultural practices that flew into these wetlands, and then they're connected larger watersheds and streams. So when we look at the site in relation to the larger, the region's larger watershed, we see it's at the center of 3, the Lime Branch, the Upper Dry Creek Branch, and the Perry Creek Branch. Water testing by the EPA is pretty limited in this area, but you can see where I've highlighted the red streams. Those are where they have done tests. And with those limited samplings, 90 to 100% of all assessed water samples come back as impaired. Some of the biggest issues they're dealing with is fecal coliform, nutrients in the water, other chemicals. So it's, and even though there's been some remediation efforts, they don't really seem to have worked and are not consistent over the long term. And testing in general also just isn't consistent, but it's a major water quality issue, not just for the site itself, but this larger region. So kind of in response to this alarming issue, this case study is proposing a mandated piece of legislation would need to be passed and utilized here. And what this utilization with this act, so solar watershed, this act would do is it would require water quality impaired solar sites like this one to expand their boundaries to touch the surrounding major streamlines, which are directly connected to the area's larger watersheds. And this is what it would look like if we did that for this site. And the existing site footprint would get a lot larger, obviously. It would go from having 200 acres of wetlands to 500, and majority of those would not be used for solar, but would be converted and be part of the site's ecological restoration efforts for the to work in conjunction with the existing solar on the site. And when you look at the existing wetland conditions, here you can see in the slide what those 500 acres of wetlands would look like visually. And in each of those blue boxes, when you're looking at the existing wetland conditions, you would find one of these three scenarios. First, which would be that there's degraded planted pines. Pines have been planted for a long time here, and their understories are very, very degraded and not cared for. You'd find degraded wetland space. You would find removed streams that just no longer exist, or removed wetlands that are very dry. And then you would also have solar setbacks spaces. And what a solar setback is there's a 200-foot requirement from solar panels that due to shading constraints, you can't plant anything in that 200-foot range from the solar panel. So there's still potentially wetlands there, but it's you can't grow anything tall. So it's just being typically mowed and cut down to prevent anything from growing tall. So there are a variety of different strategies that I have come up with that you can use to help remediate and restore these three existing conditions. And there's two categories that these 7 strategies fall into. So I'll start with the first category, which is directly repairing the stream. So the two ways to do that would be through sedimentation removal, where you use a tool like a sand lawn to take off those layers of sedimentation and other pollutants that are on the stream bed. And hopefully you can implement the correct substrate or habitat that should be there. The second strategy you can use to directly restore the stream is freshwater mussel habitat restoration. The region's mussels have been classified as federally endangered. They're really struggling to restore these populations, but the mussels are crucial for removing pollutants in the streams, such as the fecal coliform and those types of things. So they really do a great job at reducing pollutants as well. So it's important to have them in these water systems. And then once we get out of the stream itself, the edges of the stream is called the riparian buffer, and they're broken down into 3 parts. So when you immediately exit the stream, you have a zone called the inviolate stream zone, as we see here. And this zone is usually what we want to restore is dense native plantings that would provide slope and bank stabilization as well as habitat for animals. The second strategy, and it's the next layer of that riparian buffer, would be a tropical shrub zone. And this zone would be planted with high-bush blueberry and hazelnut, and these would be pruned annually for branches and wood, and also harvested annually for produce. The hazelnuts can actually be completely coppiced down to the stud every 7 to 10 years, and this is important because all the wood prunings produce an additional revenue stream for the site. They can be converted into clean biochar through biomass gasification. And then the third layer of the riparian buffer on the outermost edge is the warm season grass planting. And these warm season grasses directly filter sedimentation, pollutants, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And it can also be harvested during non-nesting seasons to produce erosion wattles as another revenue stream. So in the layers that are going down to the stream, this filter buffer is really the first line of defense for trying to clean out pollutants from in-stream water. And then, as mentioned earlier, we'd also just would want to focus on regenerating the existing planted pine forests, restoring the understory, and as well as just general wetlands areas that might no longer be existing and restore those back. So it's kind of a lot. There's all these different strategies. So I want to explain how this plays out on the site when we're looking at a section cut. So here we see 2 solar arrays. You can see there's a stream flowing in between them. This is in a 200-foot solar setback zone. And where I'm going to be walking through is where we see that white line drawn from solar panel to solar panel. So this is a drawing of that section cut that I'm going to be walking through. So on the left, underneath the solar panels themselves, this is kind of a different presentation, but there's a lot of different biodiversity measures we can take. Here it's depicting agrivoltaics, where you would be growing a crop that would do well in sun and shade conditions. And then from the solar panels, the first line of defense, we would see those filter, the warm season grasses is the filter buffer at the edge of the riparian buffer. As we go down towards the stream, we would see here the coppice shrub zone. And then most immediately next to the stream, we would have the inviolate stream zone with the dense native plantains. And then this would be mirrored on the other side until we come back up to where the solar panels are. So it just creates space right now that's really lacking any ecological connectivity to make it a very rich ecological space when we're restoring the riparian buffer in the streams and connecting it to what's going on underneath the solar panels. Another section to kind of walk through these strategies when we find to see existing degraded forest wetland condition more on the edge of the site. Here's an overview of the section. We'll kind of walk through this again. We would just be restoring the pine understory. There's even potential, and again, this is another kind of a larger conversation of community connection, but maybe there could be trails on the site for the community to come and use, because there's very little of that in this community. You'd be restoring the wetland. And when we get down to the stream itself here, you use something like the San Juan for sedimentation removal, restoring the fish or mussel habitat, and then just thinking about the general health of the wetlands as we come back up on this section. So these two sections are just two examples of what can happen when we apply this type of logic to the site. But these strategies would work for every square acre on this map. It would just be a little different for exactly what you're interacting with. But this would just be the general strategy of how we would restore water quality and restore this space with the watershed logic. And the neat thing is each of those squares would be able to generate, have so many benefits that it can generate, from flood mitigation bank credits to the clean biochar and erosion wattles as product revenue, additions to like things like blueberries and hazelnuts. There's potential for carbon sequestration credits, returning the federally endangered mussel species, water quality improves, and just having a connected habitat, which this has a lot of different ecological benefits when you start to bring nature back to the site. Additionally, even just from the water strategies, you could bring a good portion of jobs to the site, and even if you were to bring 30 to 50 jobs to be generated from the site, that could be a 1% increase for the job market in a very small town like Lakely. So that could have a really good impact. And then there's just this larger framework, and really the point of applying a logic to a site like this is to really force a reconciliation between the language of metrics that companies have and the visualization of what those metrics mean when they're projected onto the landscape. Because a company like Facebook has, ESG is something that factors into how they rank on the stock market, and they have a very low environmental risk score here. But when we actually look at the site and the conditions being generated by what their green efforts are, it doesn't really line up with what we're seeing, with what we're seeing on the numbers we see in the stock market versus what actually is happening in real life. So these types of frameworks are forcing a reconciliation between these two different types of metrics. And really the major point that I'd like to leave you in is companies should ask, number one, is their energy renewable, which is good, but also is your energy being regeneratively generated? Because that just frames a much larger issue and problem to think about, and also an opportunity for a lot of different solutions to restore nature and water. So I will end it there.
Thank you so much for that, Bob. We do have 10 minutes left, 10 whole minutes without technical difficulties. For any questions or comments from the audience, I do want to encourage you all to also maybe have questions for each other or conversations with each other, because what we do want to emphasize and highlight throughout the symposium is the importance of collaboration. So definitely opening this up for discussion. Does anybody have any questions, any comments for our guest speakers? Yes, I saw your hand go up and then yours. If you'd like to introduce yourself also as you speak, that would be great for Chloe and Bob.
right. Well, first for Bob, my name is Elena Castillo. I'm the program director for TISA Texas, which is based out of Corpus Christi. And in Corpus Christi, they're pushing a lot of desalination projects because we're not conserving our water. They're just, selling it all to industry. So how can we get you to create a presentation? I would like to discuss more consultation, maybe hiring you to look at the research in Corpus and see how we can, use this to fight back against those desalination projects. And then for Chloe, we have a lot of solar projects that are also surrounding the community, and they're all being built on wetlands. So is there a reason why they're targeting these areas? Is it just because there's available land to use, or is there a specific reason why they want to build on top of wetlands?
I would say the biggest factor they're looking for is typically if it's close to a transmission line. So if the wetlands, it might just be, across the land transmission line, but the guess is usually they're still going to be building it on these spaces. If there's wetlands there, they'll just go around them. But my guess would be that land is close to a transmission line or is not very sloped. It's really the factors they look for, the major things to try to work around them to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah, and can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, wait. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Yes, we do.
Okay, good. Because I just had to switch from my AirPods to regular internal speakers. I'm happy to make a presentation. You can get all my contact information from Trisha, Martine, Sheila, most of the people, and from Melissa. I think she probably still has my contact info. I'd be happy to make a presentation. The real issue that you need to keep in mind is that desalination is the most expensive potable water in the world. Because you got to generate a tremendous amount of energy to force the salt water, generally brine, through the membranes that strip the salt water away from the H2O molecule. And there is actually in most of the cities I've looked at, with the exception of places like deserts in the Middle East, there's absolutely no reason for you to do that. By circling the water around, reusing it, introducing it to the ground, restoring natural systems, you'll discover that historically the abundance of water in South Texas obviates the need for you to desalinate and pump water all over creation. As a matter of fact, in my estimation, don't quote me on this, it's a kind of insanity. So I would be happy to make a presentation and do a little research on your area so that I can make a lot of the work that we've done in the Northeast a little more applicable to the South Texas region. By the way, one other thing that I should add, I hope you picked up on it, but both Chloe's work and my own work is designed to generate income from restoring nature. In 1999, I came to the conclusion back when I was working in Charles River that the fastest way out of the box that we've created for ourselves is to actually make money by fixing what we've destroyed. And that can definitely, let me emphasize that can definitely be done. Chloe's work is tremendous in taking, I think, Melissa, didn't we have a meeting one time on a ranch where they had a 6,000 acre solar farm? If you look at that solar farm, it's in effect a desert. And what Chloe has done has been to take that desert and turn it into an ecologically rich area that also provides real renewable jobs and new income to add to the solar generation income.
for your question. I also have Bob's email, and I can connect you two after this. I did see another hand, Artie, if you would like to introduce yourself also.
Thank you. Artie Griffin. I'm with Emerald Cities Collaborative. I do policy work. So, Chloe, I was just kind of quick clarification question about the Solar Watershed Act. That was really intriguing. Was that legislation that happened at the local level or at the state level, or I guess just wanted to get more information on how I can look into that?
Yes, and I could hear the question. The speaker was just a little soft. Could someone just repeat the question one more time?
Speaker is back here also.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, you just move a little closer. I think that's better. Sorry, it was just super soft.
Sorry about that. Yes, it's right by the computer.
Perfect, thank you.
Awesome. So no, I was just curious about the Solar Watershed Act. Was that local legislation or was that at the state level? Just curious to find out more information about that and what it entailed.
Yes, so the idea is that it would be at the state level, because I did a lot of research into like Georgia's Department of Natural Resource, like, what they're working on and their different, statewide planning for, they have different areas they're trying to preserve and, do restoration efforts. So it was thinking about what the state policies were and trying to play into that, but I think it was designed to work at the state level.
Gotcha. And then just curious to see if the same concept could maybe work in terms of like a community benefit agreement with like a Microsoft or an Amazon, like making sure that ecological restoration is built into the projects.
Yes, I would highly there were some different approaches I had where you could even, because they're buying the electricity from the site, so even you charge, 0.5 cent more per megawatt that they're buying to be invested back into the site. That's one way you can frame it. And then there's also, if you do research like on the data centers that Microsoft owns or Facebook, they're giving, hundreds of thousands in community grants out to the city of Newnan. But they're not thinking about, why not also apply that framework to the community of Blakely? That's kind of an equal participant in the generation and support of the data center. So I think there's some really interesting ways to frame it, to work with the companies to be part of and support these efforts.
Awesome, thank you.
I might add, that's a really good idea. You have tremendous leverage over companies like Meta and Microsoft and all of them, because they want to be green and they want to be seen as the good guys. There is tremendous leverage in presenting to them a way of making their power sources actually regenerative, where they reestablish ecology. One of the things to keep in mind is that under current circumstances, we're going to lose 50% of the species on the planet. You can hold Meta accountable for that and charge them to help these solar farms actually become ecological restoration areas. It's a really, really good idea.
We do have time for one more question if anybody else has something to add. Yes, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Mario Alina, the city of Laredo, from what I remember, has an obligation by state permit to dump all the sewer water into the Rio Grande to keep it flowing. You can't divert the water. I'm not sure if that's still in place or if it's gone away, or maybe the institutional knowledge has gone away.
It's a really good point. You're not actually diverting the water, you're delaying the water. So if you put the water in the ground and you begin to restore the aquifer, ultimately that water gets to the Rio Grande in a particular knowable period of time, and it's much cleaner. You're reducing costs downstream for treating that water through filtration systems. So basically all you're doing is looking for a delayed response rather than saying that you're diverting the water and you're never going to return it. You are returning it, you're just returning it much cleaner, and in the process beginning to restore the abundance of natural systems that will stabilize flows in the Rio Grande. and also in reservoirs, by the way.
So I guess you would have to convince TCEQ that that is in fact going to be the case and allow them to give you the permit, because you have to apply for the permit every year. You need to renew it.
Showing them the actual factual data on the fact that all you're doing is delaying the water that after some particular period of time. So you bring the system online, and over some particular period of time, 6 months, a year, 18 months, probably no longer than 18 months, all the water that would have been discharged to the Rio Grande will end up going back to the Rio Grande. So you're just looking for a delay that can in a fairly straightforward manner be shown to the TCEQ. The other group that'll be really interested in that is EPA, Region 5. I think it's Region 5 for you. They're very interested in these sorts of approaches because they so dramatically reduce pollution, which is what they're on the hook for. So hopefully TCEQ could be pretty interested in that sort of outcome, because one, it's reducing costs to the municipality, probably generating income for the municipality, and all you're asking of TCEQ is that there be something like no more than an 18-month delay before the water is then discharged. And once it starts returning to the Rio Grande, that's it. It's only the first 18 months. Thereafter, that flow will continue pretty much forever.
Thank you for that, Bob. We do have 2 more minutes before our lunch break. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, make sure we don't get something. But we have one last question. If you'd like to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Yes, my name is Peter Haruna. I teach here at Texas A&M International University.
But he's standing next to the computer because we can't hear him very well.
Thank you.
My name is Peter Haruna. I teach here at Texas A&M International University, and I teach government and public finance. I'm interested in the way that your projects are designed. Your projects are sustainable. They are environmentally sustainable. They are economically sustainable. But there is a missing piece, and I just wanted clarity on that. How do they address environmental justice? How do they connect human well-being? How do you address the issue of equity and inclusion in your projects? Other than that, I think your projects are right on. They are addressing these 2 main issues. That's sustainability, economic sustainability, and environmental sustainability.
I'll go first. I didn't include that in my presentation because we're so restricted by time. But you make a good point. The thing about distributed energy, so if you put in 15 wastewater treatment plants, those treatment plants can actually enhance each neighborhood without changing the nature of the neighborhood. Okay, selling utilities in the neighborhood. And those guys that go around and take care of people's homes, their lawns, if you have lawns, or maintain facilities outside, they got mowers and blowers and rakes and the like on the back. If you add a tractor with a front end loader and a backhoe, and you also add some training, they can actually create and build the facilities that restore stormwater to groundwater connections, that restore surface water bodies and streams and wetlands. They can restore them and then maintain them. Those are ongoing, good jobs that don't require a degree from Harvard to build. So we were very interested in making sure that there was a direct environmental justice component in the way we built these things. And I know Chloe did the same with her work. Go ahead, Chloe, I'll get out of the way here.
Yeah, no, I'd say as part of the project, I had two other kind of frameworks as part of it is even a larger way to think about it of biodiversity, but then also the community. And in that framework of communities where the environmental justice component really came in. And for Blakely, they're a community with no green space. It's just not a very equitable environments for their citizens. So really, the idea was to break down the barrier of the site and to bring people in while honoring the traditions and culture. There's wiregrass culture in these southern communities that's very ingrained. And so if I had more time, I would explain these places where the community can come and actually use space on the solar site in these restored areas. So there's really a huge emphasis on trying to in a way, bring justice to the communities for these massive portions of land that are being used for corporate benefit. But I think it's a huge focus and very important for any project that's trying to achieve sustainability, I think.
Yeah, these jobs are green energy jobs. Green energy jobs are just targeted at specific segments of the population. They are not targeted at your regular low income, highly vulnerable populations in the cities. So I'm thinking more about projects that can actually segregate and target these populations. That is where the issue is. The issue is how these populations are disconnected from mainstream economics and mainstream environmental programs and so on. This is the way that I see how environmental sustainability will evolve. If it's not evolving to support low-income individuals, then we're missing the point, because that is really where the issue is.
Well, you make a good point. Let me suggest one alternative. So let's say that over the next 10 years, Laredo is going to build 15 CORCs, community water and energy resource centers, these small 2 million gallon a day wastewater treatment plants. Is there anything that prevents, say, 4 of those plants from being owned by the low-income neighborhoods, where the profits generated go back to help subsidize the cost of utilities in those neighborhoods and help provide jobs there? What I'm suggesting is that I understand where you're coming from and what the problem is. I believe it can be addressed if from the outset, one of the objectives of the design is to provide for those neighborhoods.
Thank you for that question, because the reason why we're here is to make sure that 40% of that money does go to disadvantaged communities and addresses the environmental justice issue. Well, thank you so much for bringing us back to the root of why we're here today. And with that being said, I do want to close things off because our lunch is about to begin. Chloe, Bob, I'm sad that you both are so far away. You can't join us for lunch because hopefully a lot of these conversations that were started in this room and with the previous group can be continued over lunch. There were similar conversations in the previous group around local policies and ordinance that could prevent or kind of be an obstacle for similar projects or initiatives like this. So I can definitely connect the two groups together during lunchtime. But I want to end off by thanking Chloe and Bob for their time, for their knowledge, and sharing with us a little bit more so that we have something to go off of when we start these projects locally and also start to build those connections in our own hometown. So thank you, Chloe, Bob. We're going to go ahead and close it off.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
All right, y'all.
Goodbye.
We'll see y'all soon. And then for everybody here,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Our lunch is ready, so we can go ahead and close off also and walk down this hallway. It'll be the same style, and we'll meet in not the next room, but one over.
223.